This guy has failed on its modem, so we're going to replace that once again. And I think we can call this dead. Again, one of my earliest purchases was a super cheap dual engine NEMA Cinder CX5003. I don't know what's wrong with it. We're getting voltage. The only thing reading off of it is the rudder indicator, which you can see coming in right here. Voltage, sensor, sensor, sensor. We're getting nothing on it. Yeah. Get what you pay for, maybe. The open source boat project continues, but before we get to Node-RED today, we got a couple of kind of frustrating failures that I'm glad are failing here that we got to look into and replace. Today, we're going to try Node-RED, both from an automation standpoint and from a dashboarding solution. Previous videos, we've tried Grafana, we've tried Kip, which is basically built into OpenPlotter. But today, we're going to try Node-RED. But first, a couple of things. One, you may have noticed I moved the board out to the garage, mostly because the Admiral didn't like where it was. It's not very pretty, although I think it's beautiful. Second, I added this massive 4G cellular antenna. Again, imagine it up on a mast. And so I'm wondering, you know, if I'm 10, 12 miles offshore and my cell signal is fading, would an antenna like that get me a couple more miles? Because honestly, that's about how far I normally cruise offshore. But also disappointing, we've had a failure. Our GL-iNet Spitz, which you may remember, I've replaced this once. This is a used modem I bought on eBay, and basically the modem has disappeared. When I go to configure it, it says attach a USB modem. I looked at it, and essentially there is a card inside of this that is a modem that I think has failed. And so I thought about replacing it, but at the end of the day, I bought a new one. So this is my second new one, but my third overall. And we're gonna replace it like this. They're still relatively cheap, so I'm not sure it's worth replacing the 4G card. But I want to see if that fixes it, and then I want to put some new firmware on this because I also had upgraded the firmware recently. But little disappointing, but I want to see if this fixes it. I do want failures to happen here on the bench, if you will. So we're gonna try that, then we're gonna move on to Node-RED. We will keep our old modem. Alright. Let's just see if we're on the same model here. Yep. So this is exactly the same model. So we're going to get our SD card in there, which should be saving our configuration. And here is our AT&T card. Alright. We're going to leave this here while we connect this back up. Antenna orientation shouldn't matter. I should say, you know, which connection they go in. 12 volt power supply, WAN, and LAN. So we'll let that boot. We'll go do our configuration. Hopefully that cellular side is easier than it was last time. Alright, new modem is online. So let's configure it real quick and see if we can do it faster than the last time we did this. We are seeing the cellular modem on the router, which we weren't before. Let's first set up our repeater. So repeater again is going to find a Wi-Fi network, in this case in my house, and just be a repeater for it. And while we're at it, trying to remember how we configured the cell side of this, I need to jump over to my own Florida Captain video on how to do this. But we got to get connected to the internet first. Okay, we have internet, so our repeater's working. Jump over to the Florida Captain, see if I can remember how we did this. And I will link the video for you here. Well, that's hard to see, isn't it?
For dead CDC WDN0.
Okay. Alright, let's see what we've got here. There's our configuration. Manual setup. More. We We want to be WDM0, broadband, none, auto, 66, and that's it. It's interesting. It just switched to no modem device found. Plug in your USB modem to start. That's the same error I was getting on the last modem. So I hope we move past that, because that's the problem we were having. Modem rebooted. We're good. AT&T, 4G. We're moving data. So I think we're back in business. All right, so I'm just gonna quickly reconfigure my named network. Modify this guy. Okay, let's check our firmware real quick. We do have an update available. So I would like to get this to the latest firmware. Downloading, install, okay. One thing this modem could do better is it doesn't really tell you when it's rebooting. You just drop off. Well, here's our install. We're back on our network. We are on our correctly named network. We do have internet on both Ellsworth and AT&T. Let's jump over to Signal K. All right, we're gonna jump over to VNC. Okay, so once we're on OpenPlotter, we're gonna start by enabling Node-RED. I've already done this, but I'm gonna take you through the steps, how I did it, very similar to what we did with Grafana. First thing we're gonna do is go to OpenPlotter Dashboards under the Raspberry Pi menu, and we're gonna look for Node-RED Dashboard. And we see it here, and we would highlight it and click the install button. I have already installed it. That is step 1. Then step 2 is on Signal K, we need to go to the App Store, and we need to look for Signal K Node-RED by Scott Bender, and we need to install that. And that's the order that I would install those in. So once you do that, you can go to your plugins. Remember, you might have to refresh, and you're going to see the Node-RED configuration, and it's probably disabled. Go in, click enabled, and click submit, and you're ready to use Node-RED. So, from the dashboard area, you can click open to get your port number. I've already got mine saved up here, so you'll notice it's coming from Node-RED. So another way to get there would be to go to Signal K Web Apps and just click on it from here. And we are ready to start. All of the items on your left are the nodes. And so by installing the Signal K add-in plugin with Signal K, we get all these yellow nodes, which allow us to subscribe and do things directly with Signal K. I had found it confusing originally because I was watching Node-RED videos and really didn't find anything other than the TCP/in connections, which I couldn't get to work. But with the plugin, everything's natively built in to connect to Signal K. So we're almost always going to start with a subscribe node, which will let us subscribe into something for Signal K. And then probably the most powerful node is the debug node, which will let you directly send the information coming into the subscription node into the debug console, where you'll see it appear here on right. So the first thing we did was grab the voltage from Signal K. Now we're going to grab the rudder angle by just copying the path. And then in the subscription node, we paste it into path, and that's really it. It's going to send it straight into Node-RED, and we can do something with it. So we'll hit a debug node with that too. We don't need both of them, but let's deploy this and see what we're getting. So a couple of errors appear, but if you notice under the subscription nodes, you should be getting data signals, and see we are getting one from the rudder angle that we dropped in there where it says sending with the green. So we're not getting it from voltage. That probably tells me that's where the errors are. We're going to jump forward into some more advanced things I built, and don't worry, I'll show you how we did them. So I'm looking at a function node I built that just intercepts the message on the rudder angle and shows me to starboard or to port to tell me how my rudder angle is varying. So that just shows you how we can do things The blue or the teal gauges are just that. They are gauges. They are things that appear on the Node-RED dashboard side of things. Just playing around a little bit with the theme and the site to make the dashboard more of what I want. What I do really like about Node-RED is it's highly configurable. I can not only make these changes, but I can save them to a file for my boat. So let's do a quick deploy and see how we're doing so far. So we're going to pop over to the dashboard on the right, and you can see we've got a couple of things. We are picking up voltage, although we didn't see it sent, so I'm wondering if that is historic data. We're showing the actual rudder indicator angle, and then that to starboard function that I built. But I'm starting to figure out why we're not getting data. Notice these timestamps. This was filmed on August 25th, but some of the timestamps are over 3 weeks old. I don't think we're getting data out of the CX5003. We're going to take a look at that. And I think we can call this dead. Again, one of my earliest purchases was a super cheap dual-engine NEMA Cinder CX5003. I don't know what's wrong with it. We're getting voltage. The only thing reading off of it is the rudder indicator, which you can see coming in right here. Voltage, sensor, sensor, sensor. We're getting nothing on it. So we rebooted, we're getting updated timestamps, but we're still not getting any data sent on those specific items I was looking for. I think it's dead. So let's find some test data. Thanks to Boating with the Baileys, I found this. Use file stream, enter ID of 1, choose ActiSense as your data source, and drop in this link from this video out of the description. And there is a test file sitting in Signal K already. You just have to link it up. So let's drop that in there. We'll stop getting foul data. We can at least build our dashboard and our gauges. We'll drop that in, and we'll save it and apply, and then we ought to see a lot more in our data browser. So with a quick refresh, with a quick reboot, we go back to data browser, and sure enough, notice on the source on the right, we're getting a new source prefixed by 1 dot something. That's all the test data that we were looking for. So now we're in business to do more with some more data that I just can't simulate on a bench without using test data. So let's use some of this test data. I'm going to grab the battery 1 voltage. Seems to be reliable, so I'm going to replace that in our original voltage sensor. And again, remember, when we save and deploy it, we ought to get a little green sending status below it within a few seconds. We do see it now on the dashboard, and we do see it sending below the node itself. Can play with the severities a little bit, where we can get a yellow, green, and red in our color gradient. So with more reliable data, let's play with the UI a little bit more. I'm going to add a gauge to the rudder angle, and I'm kind of trying to use a gauge to symbol, is it starboard or port? So it's not going to be your normal gauge. Could be something horizontally linear. So I'm starting to play with the groups, the size, the order, the tabs, and just see if we can start to line up things a little bit better. We do see the gauge now go all the way to one side, which is where the angle is at the moment. So let's get our min and max right, and then we can try to change the threshold sectors, if you will. I want to just use green for port and red for starboard, so I'm going to essentially eliminate the yellow by incrementing by a couple of decimal points. Let's deploy that and see what it looks like. Okay, so better. We are roughly all the way to starboard at this point. So I'm going to run over to the gauge and adjust it and see if we actually get a move. So yes, we are starboard. Yes, it says to starboard. Good to go. Let's delete some of the stuff I haven't used yet, and let's try some more things. So starting to organize, starting to think about how the UI could look better. So we're going to add another subscribe node. And in this case, we're going to pick up the battery 1 current. and just display that in text right below the battery 1 volt gauge. Let's do some quick styling on that and get the label value correct and take a look at how it looks on the dashboard. So notice that it appeared above battery 1 voltage. I was surprised by that because it really should be next. And actually, if you look here, it is next. It is in the second position. Seems like a bug. I'm just going to drag it up, deploy, drag it down, deploy, and see if it puts it in the correct second position. And sure enough, on deploy, it did seem to fix it. So it might be a bug, but it was easy to fix. So let's build another dashboard item. I'm going to grab the below keel depth. So again, subscribe node, paste in the path, and we'll connect that to a text node. We'll start cleaning up the dashboard too. So tabs are what are the navigation items on the left. So we're all in one tab, but we're going to change some of our group names and put things in different areas. We'll start that process as we're building this out. Let's experiment with our text node a little bit on the stylings that we can apply. I want to look at universal stylings, but for now, let's just play with fonts and sizes and colors and font weights and those kinds of things. So let's see how it looks when we deploy and refresh. Couple of quick edits. Let's move its position into another group. Let's put the label name in correctly. That should make it look a little more organized and a little bit better. So we got the data, but obviously we don't want all of these extraneous decimal points. I was surprised it wasn't built in to truncate or round things. So did a little research, and we're going to look into additional nodes from the community marketplace and see what we can find to round things. Actually, I found a very nice calculation and conversion item that would do this for us. Installing additional nodes is pretty easy. It's a one-click install. It happens within seconds. And without even refreshing, you go over to your node bar on the left, and you'll find it already there. So this node that I found is actually a convert from to. And so you can... It's got a lot of built-in dimensions to it, and so, you know, from feet to meters and so on and so forth. So in this case, I'm taking meters to feet. So let's use that convert node again. I want to go from Kelvin to Fahrenheit. So again, you know, it's hard to search this, but you look for your from and to, and once you find it, you drop it in, you're good to go. So let's do one more. I want to grab speed over ground. Drop a subscribe node, drop in the path. Use our convert node to convert to knots. We'll attach a gauge to do our speed. Let's grab that conversion real quick. We'll get it where we want on the dashboard, in the group size, those things. We'll play with the gauge settings to get it displayed correctly. But I noticed something. We have two speed over grounds. We have two sources. One's coming from my real NEMA 2000 network. The other's coming from the fake data. And I was thinking that's probably something we're going to deal with. So this is where you add source in to the gauges. So not just path, but source also. And you're telling it further what to pick up. And so in this case, now we're actually getting the correct gauge. So let's do something with direction that will require a different kind of gauge. I'm going to grab course over ground, and we'll drop the path in. And I'm going to use my actual GPS from my real network. So I'm going to drop that source in here. Now let's attach a gauge node to that. And in this case, we're going to try the compass and see how it works. Drop it into the right group that we want. Save, deploy. Let's see how it renders. So render's fine, not the most attractive compass, but I noticed the unit was in radians, which is obviously not something we're using normally in compass navigation. We would do degrees, so let's see if we can find radians to degrees in our convert node. So this took me a second. I thought I was getting bad data, 0.6275. But actually, that's the decimal points off of the reading data. In other words, the string is just or the number is too long to be read. So I'm debugging it here to see if I'm actually getting the data, and I am. It's about 151 degrees, but the gauge won't show it all. So now we got to solve a truncate thing. We got to get these decimal points out of here. We don't want to see them anyway. So again, doing a couple of searches, I was looking for something that would round or truncate decimal points, and I found it with what's on screen here, and it's worked actually really well. You can do a lot of math functions with it. One-click install, we'll get it in, and then it's on the left bar, and we drag it in to use. I did find that I no longer have to delete the connectors. You just drop your new node in between two others, and it will just drop right in and connect into the already linear path. So I tried a number of things here, round decimal places and 2 decimal places. It's a little confusing. Ultimately found here by playing a lot with it was I actually wanted to truncate. I didn't want to round. I just wanted to cut off digits. And you can see it's not really working. I was getting array errors and those kinds of things. But what I wanted to do was I had to go back and read the help guide. Also wasn't terribly great. But I ultimately found truncate without rounding turned on, and your constant is the number of truncations, 2 for 2 decimal points. That got it done for me. To figure this out and troubleshoot it, I actually use an inject node, and I just wanted to inject a constant number that I defined, so 1.9999, to make sure the data wasn't bad. So I did that by making that the payload, and then connecting it into my configuration. You can see me kind of troubleshooting to make sure I get the number that wasn't getting here. Now I did get it. And so I slowly started connecting nodes to figure this out, and did determine that it was in the calculation where the error was being thrown, and which was the array error. And ultimately I just couldn't use that function without an array, which means multiple numbers. But truncate does work with a single number. So let's keep going with this truncate conversion node. We'll take speed over ground down to 2 decimal points as well in the gauge display. So we'll do the same thing with depth. We'll drop the truncate in, we'll drop the conversion from meters to feet. We'll connect it all up, deploy it, and see if it updates in our gauge on refresh. Okay, let's do one more for our compass degrees. In this case, we're going to change the constant to 0 to get 0 decimal points, and it works. So let's play a little bit more with organizational elements and styling, trying to see if I can get these vertical boxes aligned correctly using spacers, making group titles and gauge titles more accurate. And then also, let's try a level gauge. I don't have any levels, so I'm just going to use an inject node and inject a 0.9 or 90% into it. So with that, I'm going to make my minimum 0, my maximum 1. So 0.9 would be 90%. Let's drop it in our group 1 and see how it renders out, and if we can get an actual tank level. And we do. So clean that up a little bit. Let's just change it to 70 to see if it works a little differently. We'll clean up our labeling and our units on it. So we send in a 70, and we do see 70 and a little better display. Last thing, why don't we get, in addition to our speed gauge, just a more obvious speed number in text. So we'll apply a style, we'll make it much bigger. Again, I'll probably use a global style for this using a template. There we go. So just experimenting a little bit more with theme settings. What does it look like if I change backgrounds? Not a fan of this, but you can see a little more definition. So we can really play around with a lot of this and make it look exactly like we want. All in all, though, pretty easy to work with. I gotta tell you, I'm pretty impressed with Node-RED. I think I need to consider it in two ways. One, it's an automation solution. Two, it has a dashboarding component. The automation solution is super cool for me. I'm not a programmer, but the flow-based approach makes a lot of sense, and then you can go find the code you need, or someone who might have built a community node for something. So that's really cool. The dashboard solution is not as great as some of the other ones, but I could use another dashboard solution with it. So I really like Node-RED. I'm gonna probably work on it a little bit more. But in the final part of our automation and dashboard series for the open source yacht, we're gonna look at Home Assistant. That'll be the next video. Stay tuned.